there's just so many pieces of evidence that links her. I mean, it's her car, it's her trunk, there's a dead body in there, child's hair is in there, there's chloroform, all of these things, and she gets to walk, and to me, there was no justice served for that little girl. Welcome to the first episode of LA Legal. I'm Leanna. I'm the supervising attorney over at West Coast Trial Lawyers. Since this is our debut segment, I want to briefly introduce my friends and colleagues, Sam and Nick. So why don't you go ahead and tell everyone, all of our viewers and listeners, what you do at the firm, and then we'll jump into our topic of the week.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Simontub. I'm one of the litigation attorneys in the personal injury department.
And my name is Nick Yasmin. I'm one of the employment attorneys.
Awesome. So we do personal injury. We also have an employment department, and we're plaintiffs' attorneys. So we represent plaintiffs only. We don't do any defense work. So today's segment is going to be about re-examining some of the most popular cases that have obviously wrapped up. We kind of muled over the topic for today, and we just thought it would be really appropriate because there's always so much to talk about. So this is more of like a how the heck did they get away with it type of a segment, okay? So I don't think we can talk about any famous trials without starting with OJ Simpson, okay? So let me ask you guys this first. Do you remember it? I mean, is it just one of those things, like without giving everyone's age away, like were you old enough to watch it as it was happening? We all know that famous chase scene. Or was it something you kind of learned? Obviously, they teach and talk about it in law school and, you know, different phases of life.
I did not follow it live when it was happening, but I definitely did hear about it when it was going on, and I learned about it throughout school. In undergrad, I remember them teaching about it. In law school, we did a case study on it. And even when I worked for the district attorney's office in downtown Los Angeles, one of the summers, they actually brought some guest speakers to even discuss this case. So it is used as an example in a lot of different areas.
How about you?
And no, I was too young to remember it. I was like 4 or 5, but obviously it's ever present in pop culture. Even, I mean, all those new shows on Netflix and stuff, documentaries, even like on that Michael Jordan documentary even has a big segment on the OJ chase, and it's just everywhere. So, right. You know, it'll probably always will be.
Okay, So let's talk, and we don't have to do like a thorough, you know, but let's just talk about why it became so well known and, you know, broadcasted the way it was, right? So number one, we have a celebrity figure, right? We have an NFL player. We have 2 dead bodies. We have pretty much any kind of incriminating evidence that can possibly be out there. And we have a not guilty conviction. So let's talk about that a little bit, okay? I'm going to ask you the $1 million question. Everybody gets asked this all the time. Is he guilty, in your opinion?
I think so. He did have to pay up in the civil trial, I think, after the fact. The standard for criminal cases is higher, and the defense did a really good job of putting reasonable doubt in the jury's mind. But I think more likely than not, he didn't.
How about you?
Yeah, more likely than not, he did it. Shortly after the civil suit, I think he was liable for like $33 million. He moved to Florida, where they can't seize his assets, his house, whatever. So a bunch of that's been unpaid still, I guess, I learned. But if we're talking about guilt and why he was not found guilty, I think it's unavoidable to discuss the racial components of it, namely the LAPD, namely the jury pool, namely the jury, and just the optics of his race, NIcole's race. And I think, yeah, that's just an unavoidable topic if we want to discuss why he was not found guilty.
Right. So I think I agree with you. I also think what's important is that seemingly this was a slam dunk case, right? I mean, and I think that the prosecution and, you know, everyone working on the case really thought so too. So in my opinion, they really got cocky early on, thinking this is a no-brainer. So when you pair that with, I mean, an incredible, talk about dream team, defense team, I think that's where things went horribly wrong very, very quickly. Would you guys agree?
Yes, but there was also a lot of fumbles by the prosecution. I think you are right. They did get overconfident. They didn't think some things would be an issue when they absolutely were. One of the main things people talk about, and I think there's a famous picture of it, when the glove doesn't fit on his hands. Well, the defense team said, well, we don't know whose blood might be in there or how dirty it is. He should wear a latex glove. And I think there was something, correct me if I'm wrong, some medications where his hands were swelling. So it was very clear that glove did not fit in his hand at the time.
What was it? If it don't fit, you must
If
acquit?
it don't fit, you must acquit. And I think the prosecution really fumbled that. I believe they allowed it without even testing it first. One of the main rules at trial is you don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. And they didn't know the answer to whether that glove would fit in his hand, and it ended up blowing up in their face.
Right. And that really was, I think, what put, the jury over the edge, to really find him not guilty. I do think that was just that moment, in time that will forever be ingrained in our brains, that if it don't fit, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. The photo, him trying to put the glove on, and yeah, I agree. I think that is just one of those moments no one's ever going to forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always, it stuck with me, that rumor that the dream team of defense attorneys were basically giving him a medication to increase his blood flow and the size of his hands.
And they also, I had read that they constantly had a lot of water in front of him, so that he's drinking a ton of water, right? Obviously water kind of makes you expand. So, I mean, it was just fantastic defense. But really, I think it's just one of those situations where it shows that you can, in my opinion, literally get away with murder if you have the means to counsel like he did. I mean, he's got tons of money. He was able to rack up an incredible team. He didn't have one, he didn't have two. He had a ton of attorneys, Cochran, Kardashian, all of these heavy hitters that really came together and, worked on his defense. So
I think $6 million of legal fees to his team, and that's in 1994, 1995. Right. So
well deserved.
Well deserved. I mean, they did fantastic. And you're right. I mean, race did come into it. I mean, Johnny Cochran just kind of stepped up to the forefront, and I think that is another component, in addition to just kind of some of this evidence that came in. But I think that was a huge component given the time that came into play. So, the rest is history, really.
Yeah. And then another thing I think it's important to bring up is how new DNA evidence's use was at the time. So, I mean, first of all, you have to kind of question its accuracy then. You have to question how much people are going to trust it when it's just this new piece of technology. Right. I just don't think it held as much weight back then as it does for us now.
Well, they also were able to put someone on the stand who stated that there was mishandling of the evidence, right? So there was a break in the chain of custody, which is huge, which allows defense to start to poke holes into how splatters of blood came to be on his in his vehicle, on his clothes. I mean, if you look at it from just a logical standpoint, right? I mean, this is just something that's always baffled me, is there were 3 traces of DNA found at the crime scene, right? 2 of them came from the dead bodies, and 1 of them came from OJ. Nothing else, no one else, and yet this guy was
no Colombian drug dealers.
Yeah, nobody else, right? 3 pieces of DNA, 2 of them are from the dead people, and 1 is from the alleged killer, and then he gets, found not guilty. So again, fantastic defense team. You guys have any last comments before we move on to?
Yeah, another interesting part was, I guess there's a jailhouse guard, and when OJ was in jail pre-trial, one of his old buddies from the NFL, who was also a pastor technically at the time, so there's a privilege invoked there, the jailhouse guard overheard OJ basically admit to the murder, but because it was hearsay and they couldn't get him to testify.
Right. And what I think one other point I'd like to make is that a few years ago, he came up with a book that was, and he also said this in an interview, had I done it, or something, if I did it, right? And it just is, he talks about it in such gory detail where you're like, is this an admission?
Yeah, it's
Are
insane.
You trying to tell us something? Yeah. And again, of course, the rule of double jeopardy. Even if he comes out and says he did it, he won't be prosecuted. But it just, the amount of detail that was put in that interview, it's actually kind of chilling, because he's just sitting there, looking at the camera and just talking about it, and then he wraps up with, "But I didn't do it." Well, that's an if.
He also recently said he's afraid to come to LA or California because the real killer is still out there, and he's afraid that person's going to come after him. So
I mean, he definitely is playing that role very, very well. And speaking of roles, one last comment I want to make is, and I think this is going to be a common theme in the other 2 cases that I want to talk about, is the alleged killers' stance, right? The way they behave, the role they take on immediately after, the incident happens. So Caylee Anthony, OJ Simpson, and Amanda Knox, that all comes into play. And one of the main reasons that he became a person of interest was because of his initial behavior. And this is according to the officer who met with him to tell him that his ex-wife had been killed. So what do you think about people's demeanor? What role do you think that plays in these kinds of situations?
I think it does help the police evaluate if this might be the right person. If they're coming to tell you like your wife has been murdered and you're not immediately sad about it, or you're being really shifty or something, that kind of tips, just logically, that kind of tips a normal person off. Like, hey, this person's not acting the way somebody who just lost their wife would be acting.
Right, and law enforcement does this all the time, right? We see it even in car accidents. When people pass away, there's a fatality. They go to the home and they deal with the loved one. So when something doesn't immediately appear to kind of fit that mold, and granted, not everyone reacts a certain way, but there's a way of reacting to news that you already know is coming versus, shock.
Yeah, and supposedly OJ initially, he asked, did my kids see it happen? Not, are my kids all right? Implying that he knew his kids were all right. He wanted to know if they watched it.
Right. So it was a series of questions. It was his demeanor that ultimately got him on the hook, right? Because I don't think he would have initially even been thought of as a person of interest. So very interesting trial. I don't think we've heard the last of OJ, right? He every so
I saw him in Vegas like a year ago.
Did you really?
Yeah, the Red Rocks. Yeah.
No way.
I suppose he goes there a lot.
Well, that's as closest to California.
Yeah. 30 miles.
I will also leave on this. I took a communications class one time in college, and one of the things they taught us is the news cycle. There's certain things that you just keep seeing because people just love to eat up that information. One of them was OJ Simpson, and then we had a project to do a few weeks later. We had to find a news article. Lo and behold, there was an article about OJ Simpson, and I submitted that one, and it was directly on point. So you're going to be hearing about OJ forever.
Yeah, you will. And look, again, he comes out every few years. He'll make a statement. He's writing a book. He's
Something
doing interviews.
happens.
Yeah, he's been
Something
tweeting
happens.
lately,
He's
too,
tweeting.
about it, yeah.
The guy is trying to stay as relevant as he possibly can. So with that said, let's talk about Caylee Anthony. This case really made my blood boil. But again, it's one of those situations where she had apparently a very, very good defense attorney who was really unknown. No one had really heard of him, Jose Baez. He's now highly sought after, after winning her case. And he's actually been in the news. He's done fantastically well. But, for those of you who don't know, Caylee Anthony had a 2-year-old daughter, Caylee, who went missing, and her mother, Casey, did not report her missing for over a month. And it wasn't until her parents, so Caylee's grandparents, caught on to the fact that something's not right. They called 911. They located the abandoned vehicle that belonged to Caylee. There was a foul odor. Caylee's father was an ex-law enforcement, so he immediately recognized the odor as that of decomposing body. An investigation was launched. Of course, Caylee Anthony, the mother, was the person of interest immediately because she didn't report her daughter missing for over a month. She sent law enforcement on a crazy goose chase to Universal Studios, where she claimed she worked, where she didn't, to a home of somebody who she claimed was her daughter's nanny, and she really, in fact, was not. So a lot happening here, and her defense counsel made some shocking allegations, which then I think is what helped put that reasonable doubt in the jury, right? He claimed that Caylee was molested as a child, which then perpetuated the cycle of her lying to cover up her father's tracks. And the biggest bombshell was that her defense attorney claimed that the child had drowned in the family pool, and the family freaked out, and instead of reporting this incident to 911, the father, as an ex-law enforcement officer, staged as if the child was abducted, killed. They buried her in the woods, where she was ultimately discovered. So, thoughts?
There's a lot of inconsistencies on this one. I think the biggest one is you don't report your child missing for a month. Why? Again, this goes back to what we were talking about, suspicious behavior at the beginning. Within an hour, if you have a child and you're a parent, I think you would you report them missing. If you're at home,
my kid's missing for 15 minutes. I'm calling
in other circumstances, a few minutes would do it. If the parent cared about their child and they didn't do anything to the child, I think you would find a lot of involvement of the parent trying to find their child. So that doesn't add up to me.
Right. And she not only didn't report her child missing, she was partying. She got a tattoo that said La Bella Vita, which is that beautiful life. I mean, this is just not behavior that's consistent with a mother who doesn't know where her child is.
Yeah, this is one I do think she did it, but I don't completely blame a jury for not getting beyond a reasonable doubt. Just the amount of evidence that ties Casey to doing it herself with the chloroform and the duct tape rather than covering it up awfully. It's not insane for a jury to not find beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah,
I agree with you, and I think where the turning point was that her mother got on the stand and said that I was the one who was searching or looking up chloroform, right? Because remember,
there's a search for the
FBI
word chloroform
was able to locate or pick up multiple chloroform searches on their family computer. So when the mom said, "Hey, I was looking for it because something about plants," I think that's what put the reasonable doubt in the jury's mind that maybe it was somebody in the family, but not Casey specifically.
Yeah, and on that topic, initially the prosecution's computer expert guy said that chloroform was searched 84 times on that computer, and then halfway through the trial, he called them from a different state and said, "I made a mistake. It was only searched once."
Right.
So they have to tell that to a jury who you wouldn't blame for responding to that with this whole thing.
But then again, the child's remains are discovered with duct tape over now, her skull, unfortunately, because it had decomposed. There was chloroform on that duct tape. So again, I think I don't blame the jury because it gets confusing and they have very specific instructions. But just looking at all the facts, I mean, again, her behavior, the parents, and all of these wild accusations. And why would you send law enforcement who's now trying to find your missing child to some nanny's house that doesn't exist, right? I mean, this person was never her nanny.
Yeah, the lies never ended.
It never ended. She ultimately got jail time for tampering with evidence and lying to law enforcement investigators. But on the criminal aspect, she was never convicted. She was found not guilty. So that to me was one of those cases that really, really made my blood boil.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's just hard to get past the duct tape.
Yeah.
The duct tape, and I mean, it's a
and there's evidence that there used to be a little heart sticker that was on the duct tape. I guess it came off somehow, whatever.
Right, right. And they discovered a strand of the child's hair in the trunk that was also consistent with decomposition. I don't really know how that works. But, there's just so many pieces of evidence that links her. I mean, it's her car, it's her trunk, there's a dead body in there, child's hair is in there, there's chloroform, all of these things, and she gets to walk, and to me, there was no justice served for that little girl. So we just have a few minutes. I want to touch on the Amanda Knox case, because this one, I think, also took up the country by storm, because this was an American girl who was in Italy for a study abroad program. Her roommate winds up missing. She too, when she finds out, sends investigators on a crazy chase about saying that she saw her employer, was Lumumba it was her boss or coworker.
Her boss and landlord, I think.
Boss and landlord, he was there. So all of these lies about things that never happened, and her demeanor, again, she is, she shows up to her investigation and she's making out with her boyfriend. So all of these things are not consistent with somebody who is shocked that there was a break-in into her apartment where her roommate winds up dead. So final thoughts on that?
I think she was found guilty, but then it was overturned at some point.
Yeah.
Well, she came to America, and then her appeal was in Italy, but she just
it went back and forth, and then there was some sort of Italian grand jury, but she didn't leave the United States, obviously. Something. But right now, I think she's free.
And they found I forgot the name of the other individual who was released when they should have been, or something like that.
It was her boyfriend.
No, there was somebody else that they identified, and
that was her employer. That was Lumumba.
And everyone thinks that is the person.
No. I read up on it. It's there's just some other guy who
it was a random guy with
Guerra or something like that. He was convicted at the time, I think. Yeah,
he was convicted.
He ran off to Germany. They extradited him back to Italy. I'll be honest, I don't think Amanda Knox did it.
I don't think she did it either.
I don't know if I don't know. So this is one of those where I don't have a strong opinion, but did she get lucky by being from the United States and somehow getting back here?
Maybe,
Absolutely.
maybe not, because I know there was a lot of issues with her communicating. She couldn't communicate well, and some things were lost in translation, which led law enforcement to double down and really believe that she is the one. From the very outset, they were targeting her. They didn't even tell her. So she would show up and talk to them freely and willingly.
They also, sorry to cut you off, but they ultimately got a confession from her for this very reason. She didn't understand, and she certainly couldn't read well enough to understand what she was signing, and she ultimately confessed.
That's why
the
Italian appeals court let her off initially, because they never provided her an interpreter. And imagine like studying abroad in Italy, you've been learning Italian for 2 months,
Right.
and now after like
interrogated.
Extensive interrogations with
for
cops,
hours and hours, right.
you know, now you would have admitted to something in a language you don't speak, like
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
For sure. But also, you know, cops, even here in America, they're not above, you know, sort of pinpointing somebody and then just hammering down on them and trying to get a confession. And you've been now in a cell for like 8 hours, no food, no water. You're just kind of like, okay, I'll admit to whatever, just get me out of here.
I think it was much longer than that.
Yeah, for her, in her case.
I think it was almost the entire day, over and over for a week straight. It was something insane like that, and there's rules in this country against that, against interrogating somebody like that and coercing a confession.
Yeah, I mean it's essentially like torture, you know. And like if you want to.
And they secured that confession, and that's what they wanted. Yes.
Yeah.
Question.
One question to wrap up the segment. Any hope that new DNA technology and testing will help any of these cases?
So I think they actually did find the DNA of that other person in the Amanda Knox case. And obviously her DNA was in there because that was her roommate. And I think the working theory was that she was jealous of her roommate, or her roommate was saying, hey, you shouldn't be so promiscuous, you shouldn't go see these people. And then that jealousy caused her to kill her in a rage, which, I mean, I don't know if I buy that either, especially when there's somebody else's DNA there.
Yeah.
So DNA was used in the Amanda Knox case.
Yeah, and I don't know about Italian laws so well, but it's worth touching on the idea of double jeopardy, that these people have already been tried for their case.
Right.
It could be very difficult to retry them.
Right. Okay, so we have literally like 1 more minute. Socks of Sam. Sam, show us what you have on today.
Today we got some camel socks.
Camel socks. Nice blue
Very cool.
camel socks. That match your outfit. Good
Thank
for
you. Thank you.
Guys, it was a pleasure having you. I mean, I think this was really fun. There's so much to talk about. Maybe we'll do a part 2 with a few other trials that, you know, there's plenty of them to choose from. But thank you for joining me, Nick. Thank you for joining me, Sam. All
Thank
of
you.
thank you for tuning in and listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.